intermission dance.
Do your intermission dance, intermission dance, intermission dance. Do an intermission dance.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the D3 Datacast. Please click the subscribe button here on YouTube if you haven't already. And if you have, we want to thank you so much. That's a big part of helping our channel grow. We'd also invite you to connect with us on social media. We are on Twitter and Facebook as D3 Datacast. Search for that and you should have no problem finding us. So Matt, we had a little bit of a lighter week in Division III basketball with Thanksgiving. It really didn't pick up until we got to Saturday and Sunday here. But how was your D3 week?
My D3 week was great. I'm a little bit thrown off because you did a little different intro style than normal, but I'm kind of catching my bearings here. It was a lighter week across the D3 world with the Thanksgiving holiday. For me, it wasn't as light. Calvin had three games at home, so I got to attend all of those games. Really good week for Calvin. I think they're going to end up in the rankings. We'll probably get to that a little bit later. But the three games, they were all wins. First off, on Tuesday, they beat Hiram by 30 points. Then on Friday, they won by 8 over a pretty pesky Rockford team. And then Saturday, winning by 11 against UW-Stevens Point. I don't think these three teams are all going to figure maybe into the national rankings or into the at-large bid discussion that we're going to have later on in the year, probably. Hiram in particular was a very interesting team because of the what I'll call the shape of their team. They rank in my efficiency ratings the number 61 offense, so they can score the ball, but they're the number 400 defense, so other teams can score the ball pretty well against them. And in particular, they shoot a good number of three-pointers. They weren't hitting against Calvin, and then they couldn't stop Calvin on the other end, so that kind of got out of hand. And like I said, the Calvin Knights ended up winning by about 30. By the efficiency ratings, Hiram ranks last in the NCAC, but I think they're going to maybe beat some teams in that conference if they just have a hot shooting night. That's that high offense, low defense kind of team. On the right night, maybe you can beat someone. But we'll see. They're going to give up a ton of points. We'll have to see what happens with the Hiram Terriers there. Then the Friday night game against Rockford, I think they're going to win a lot of games in the Northern Athletics Conference. Rockford, that is. They're number 3 in the conference by the efficiency ratings. That's not a top-tier conference by any means. But Rockford's kind of a pesky team. They're similarly shaped to Hiram in that they have a strong offense and a weaker defense. They're not as extreme. Their defense is more average than bad. I think they're going to win a lot of games in that conference, maybe compete for the Pool A in the Northern Athletics. But they were a tough battle for Calvin just because they don't quit, and they have a couple of really skilled players, and they were making some outside shots. And that's a thing that I think the Knights have seen. They have a really strong defense, but teams that can make from the outside, they're going to give everyone trouble. The Saturday game, UW-Stevens Point, I thought the Pointers showed a lot of grit and guts. They're going to be, I think Bob Quillman tweeted after the Calvin game over UW-Stevens Point that he thinks the Pointers are going to be a tough out in the WIAC, and I agree. Even though I think they'll be toward the bottom of that conference, once they put the pieces together, that's a young team. I think they're going to improve as the season goes on. This game in particular was tight most of the way. It was 50-50 with about 3 minutes left, and then Calvin went on an 11-0 run to finish it. I think Stevens Point is going to beat some teams in the WIAC. In this game, Calvin actually showed themselves to be the team that could execute down the stretch and finish strong. Very excited to see that from the Knights. But, I think Stevens Point's an interesting team. They've been flirting with the top 50 in the Massey Ratings so far, and I'm just interested to see what they do in conference play. And for our Calvin Knights, I'm really excited to see what happens this week. I'm submitting my ballot, and for the first time, I will be submitting Calvin as a top 25 team. By the efficiency ratings, they have, I think actually today, the number 12 defense in the country. Their offense struggles at times. It's above average, but it struggles at times to score a ton of points. Freshman center Jalen Overway has been the focal point of the offense for much of the season, and teams are responding to that with automatic double teams, and they're making him kick the ball out. And so far, Calvin hasn't really hit their three-pointers at a high percentage. I think they're going to need to do that to force teams to make a decision. Hasn't really happened yet. I think they'll shoot better going forward than they have in the past, but that's maybe one area of concern for their offense, or why their offense maybe hasn't completely clicked yet. Calvin's another good young team. I think they're going to improve as the season goes on, so it'll be very exciting to see Calvin finish non-conference play here, already 7-0, and get into MIAA play starting in January. One maybe slight hesitation that I have is they've played largely at home this season. 6 home games, I think it is, and 1 road game. So they're going to have to get out on the road and experience that, especially, again, as a team that has a lot of freshmen and sophomores in the rotation. In December, we're going to see them play at Wheaton and at Elmhurst, a couple of quality CCIW programs, then a tournament in Florida with a couple of other D3 teams on the schedule there. So they're going to get tested out on the road, I think, and that'll be good for them as they look to build on this strong start in conference play. But excited, personally, very excited for our Calvin Knights. I'm sure you are too. But that's kind of what I did most of this week. Zach, what about you?
Yeah, since it was such a slow week, some of the early news was actually not directly D3 related, but at the Division One level, it was announced who would host the Final Four for, let's see, 26 through 29. And the reason that even has anything to do with Division Three is that the NCAA has experimented with bringing all the championships to one site in the past. So they had in 2013, they were all at the Division One Final Four, which kind of changed up the Division Three basketball tournament schedule. And then they were scheduled to do that again in 2020, except that was the COVID year that canceled everything. So based on that 7-year cycle, that would put 2027 in line to potentially have another one of these, single site championships, which is interesting because the current format that ends in Fort Wayne runs through 2026. So not that those two necessarily have to line up because, the NCAA has made adjustments in the past. It's just kind of interesting to see 2027 lines up with what they've done for single site championships in the past. And that also would be the first year of either maybe a new contract with Fort Wayne or a new site for the Division III Final Four. Of course, 2027 is also of interest to us being Michiganders because that Final Four will be held in Detroit. So there's the possibility that maybe we would see a Division III championship game here in our state. Now, of course, this is just speculation, and we're just looking at what has been, how things have lined up in the past. So that's something to be looking out for in the future. And I know this week on last week on Hoopsville, Dave McHugh also mentioned that and had some thoughts of how that might turn out a little bit differently than the 2027 year in Detroit.
Yeah, and on Hoopsville, Dave's segment where he talked about a similar announcement for the Final Four dates, he was maybe more targeting the Indianapolis Final Four, which I think lines up with the NCAA's 90th anniversary. Is that the 2029 year? And
yeah, I think it's the 90th anniversary of the NCAA basketball tournament.
The tournament, right? Yeah. So yeah, his thought was since it's an anniversary, since it's Indianapolis, the NCAA might be looking at that one, and I agree that would be a very likely candidate as well if the 7-year rhythm isn't a thing that they care about too much.
Yep. So outside of that, I'd be similar to you, keeping an eye on the Calvin games. Tuesday we had the Oswego State at Nazareth game, which was our upset watch game of the week, which once again came through as Nazareth pulled out the win at home against Oswego State. I was also doing a little scoreboard watching in the UW Oshkosh game against Edgewood. Surprisingly, they trailed by 1 at halftime. And with the start of the season they've had, it's kind of, you start wondering what's wrong with Oshkosh. But I don't know what was said in the halftime locker room, but it must have worked because they ended up winning 79-52. So completely turning around, and then they finished out the week pretty strong. So must have been a heck of a locker room message there. But I guess with the way the week ended, we don't necessarily have to worry about Oshkosh as much as we did at halftime on last Tuesday. And then, Wednesday, you and I got a chance to check out some Division I basketball, attending the game between Jackson State and Michigan at Chrysler. We were both keeping our eye on another big D3 game that night, though, between Mount Union and Worcester. An impressive result for Mount Union there with a convincing win. So Mount Union has certainly established itself as one of the top teams. Of course, they came into the year with high expectations and, every bit living up to it so far. So yeah, it was really good to see. I mentioned Oshkosh. They had a big game Saturday with Illinois Wesleyan. It was a 2-point game in Oshkosh's favor at the half. And then they put together a really nice second half, 'finished the game with a turnover advantage of 17-3 So great job, keeping control of the ball, forcing turnovers, which Illinois Wesleyan's been prone to do so far this year. But another indication that maybe Oshkosh has turned the corner and putting it together a little bit more into the type of team we thought they would be. And then another top 25 upset Saturday night between Puget Sound and Pomona-Pitzer. Technically a neutral court, but that game was at CMS. So considering they're all CMS and Pomona-Pitzer are all part of the same consortium, that's probably the least neutral you can get. But Puget Sound pulls out the victory there. So Pomona-Pitzer was ranked 12th in the preseason poll, and they've been a bit of a disappointment so far, including that loss to Puget Sound. So I know we'll get into some top 25 talk, but they were definitely one of the disappointments of the preseason poll.
Yeah, last week we talked about Wesleyan being a disappointment of the preseason poll, having some tough results. I think Pomona-Pitzer is maybe right there with them to some degree. They haven't played as many Division III teams. Being out west, they play few more NAIAs and NCCAA teams and the like. But they lost to Mary Hardin-Baylor, who also lost to Claremont Mudd Scripps. They've lost to Puget Sound in this game, and then they have a win over UC Santa Cruz by, I believe, 4 points. But they're 2-4 overall, and I think that's 1-2 versus Division III. Still a lot of basketball for them to play, but right now Pomona-Pitzer has not at all looked like the team that we thought maybe they would be coming into the season. So yeah, that's definitely a team to keep an eye on for maybe different reasons than we thought.
So wrapping up the week, you're on the hook for a new top 25 ballot, as this is the first in-season poll we'll get coming out this week. So how did you see things shaping up between your preseason poll and what you're doing for this first update?
Yeah, you want to take a peek at the ballot I just submitted? Here it comes. That didn't click. All right, here it clicks. So this is the ballot that I officially submitted on Sunday night to D3Hoops.com. Poll will be out today, probably this evening. But here are my picks. For me, kind of these top 4 teams in particular, there's not very much to separate them in my mind. In fact, with Christopher Newport, right up until sort of the end of their game today, which was one of the later games on Sunday, as we record this on Sunday, I was maybe considering them probably not number 1, unless maybe they pasted NC Wesleyan today. But number 2, number 3, number 4, I wasn't quite sure exactly where I'd put them. I think my Thanksgiving update that I kind of posted on Twitter, I had them in 4, and I ended up keeping them there after their result today. I kept them at 4, but I think that's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to be watching them for the next several weeks. They could flip order. I don't think there's a big separation for me there. Last year we saw Randolph-Macon. And I think maybe there was a big separation, particularly by the end of the year. That's not the case right now. And then Elmhurst and Keene State, maybe just outside that group, but maybe closing in. Another maybe point where teams are tightly bunched for me is in that 12 through maybe 17 or 18 range, kind of Swarthmore through Calvin. I had several iterations where I shuffled a bunch of those teams around. I think that middle of the poll for me is very tightly bunched up. I didn't completely know what to do. I did end up keeping UW-Oshkosh above Calvin, even though Calvin had that 3-point home win. And then the last maybe 5 or 6 spots from St. Thomas down, another tightly bunched group with maybe 5 teams after this. I ended up keeping Mary Washington in the poll, even though they got absolutely pasted on Sunday by Johns Hopkins. That was a game that was never close. And Hopkins ended up winning, I think, by 34 today. And I really went back and forth on this one. In the end, I was okay keeping Mary Washington in. They do own a victory over Randolph-Macon. Again, not the same Randolph-Macon team that we saw a year ago. But to me, once we started getting to these final few spots in the poll, last few in, first few out, I kept coming back to that win as being one of the stronger wins that are out there. This loss to Christopher Newport was sizable. I'm sorry, not Christopher Newport. Johns Hopkins. Yeah, yep. was sizable, and I took that into account. But again, this part of the poll, teams have kind of a loss, maybe 2, or some questionable results that you have to kind of explain away anyway. Up for consideration in that spot was maybe a team like Marietta for me, just missed. They have a big loss to Keene State as well, and Keene State and Johns Hopkins are similarly spotted up in the poll. Mary Washington's margin was a little bit bigger than Marietta's, but again, a similar type of result. I thought that Mary Washington had the better win, so I felt like putting them in. Not set in stone for weeks into the future, but for right now, this is kind of what I ended up with, and had some tough decisions. Teams that I was kind of wanted to get in, but couldn't quite fit in the last few spots. I mentioned Marietta, Nazareth, Wabash, Wash U I considered for a while getting in there. Some others from 21 to maybe 35. I think there's a lot of arguments to be made for a bunch of those teams. And ultimately, these were the ones I settled on.
So relevant in there, you have 3 Blue Jays. So we wanted to play a little game. I'm ashamed to admit that earlier last week, I was tripped up seeing a logo in a tweet, and I thought initially I thought it was one Blue Jay team, but it turned out to be another Blue Jay team. So we're going to play a little game called How Well Does Matt Know the D3 Blue Jays?
So you grab these logos. You have the answer key. I've not seen the answer key.
Yep.
I do think I'm going to get this right, though.
Yeah, well, the way this week played out, I think there was a lot of opportunities for some studying, whether you knew it or not. But yes,
I think I got lucky because I was watching that Hopkins Mary Washington game today, so I think I will get that one right. And that's maybe the one that would have tripped me up the most was Johns Hopkins. But I'm just going to go left to right, and I'll say my answers, and then at the end you say how many I got right. Does that sound good?
Yeah, left to right. Yep.
Okay.
Yes, I rescinded your access to my D3 Datacast notes.
Yes.
So that you couldn't see the answer key, but
yes,
but yes, you did know this was coming. So, like we said, with some of the focus on some of the teams, you're put in a good position to not embarrass yourself here. So go ahead and don't embarrass yourself.
I think the first logo on the left is E-Town. Oh yeah, you're gonna tell me at the end.
I'm not gonna go one by one. No, you need to give, because then you can narrow it down. You need to give the full slate here, and I'll give them to you the complete set. Okay.
Elizabethtown, Elmhurst, Westminster, St. Joseph, Johns Hopkins.
You're correct. 5 out of 5.
Woo!
5 out of 5.
I probably would have had a good chance of mixing up Hopkins and Elmhurst in particular, but I did see the Hopkins court today, and I remembered that you talked about the Blue Jays and mixing up the logos, and I did, see that that's what the Hopkins logo was.
You made a little mental note.
I made a mental note, not on purpose, but I was watching a game for legitimate reasons.
In full disclosure, the mix-up I had was Elmhurst and Johns Hopkins. And
they're very similar.
So I saw a tweet because they played Gettysburg earlier in the week, and I saw the big block G, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how it came to be that Elmhurst is playing Gettysburg, and then I was like, oh wait, no, this is a tweet from Johns Hopkins.
Yeah.
And so I didn't put them side to side. I wanted to try to mix it up a little bit, but obviously they are different when you see them like this. But just seeing one at a time and kind of briefly, I did mix up the Elmhurst Blue Jay and the Johns Hopkins Blue Jay.
Yeah. Well, they're both a profile view, left to right, with the little kind of shield thing in the background.
Right. They both look fierce, but the Johns Hopkins Blue Jay has a little bit of a grumpier look. So that's how now I know to keep them apart. Also kind of a similar look between the Elizabethtown and the St. Joseph Blue Jay as well. And then Westminster's kind of the odd bird of the 5 Blue Jays.
Yeah. But shouts to Elizabethtown for
looking the other direction.
The other direction from the other ones.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Way to be unique there. Anything else you want to say about the Blue Jays? Elmhurst, very good. Hopkins, very good. St. Joseph, very good.
No, it just seems like it's a good year to be a Blue Jay. Yeah. So looking forward to seeing which Blue Jay comes out on top.
They're 3 in the top 7 there. That's strong from my poll.
Yes, we had one of our pick slates earlier in the year had a very heavy Cardinal / Redbird influence, and so we want to give the Blue Jays their full due here.
And I also knew St. Joseph in particular because we put them 5 times, I think, on our top games of November list. So we were pasting that logo into our slides several times. So I did know that one as well.
Yes, and Johns Hopkins was in there at least a couple times too. So you did have a lot of practice in moving logos around.
Yep. So today's efficiency ratings review, I wanted to take a look at the teams that make up the top 5 defenses in the country and the teams that make up the top 5 offenses in the country, and just to look at kind of what that means for them as a team, kind of the shape of their team. I talked about, I guess the term I used was shape of a team when I talked about Hiram and Rockford, these teams that Calvin played. But just kind of maybe interesting to look at. So here's the top 5 teams as of Sunday's midday run by the efficiency ratings. If you look this up on Monday, they might have slightly changed. But the top 5 defenses were UW Oshkosh, then Christopher Newport, then St. Joseph, Connecticut, Randolph-Macon, and Averett actually was number 5. And you can see the first column there after that is the adjusted efficiency margin. So that's the difference between their offensive rating and their defensive rating. Higher is better. So Christopher Newport actually is the number 2 defense. They're the number 1 team in the efficiency ratings at plus 27.1. And you can see that they get to be the number 1 team with a pretty strong offense and a very good defense. Teams like UW Oshkosh and St. Joseph, Connecticut are shaped a little bit different. Maybe you can even throw Randolph-Macon in there at this point. They're above average offenses, but they're really relying on their defenses right now in particular. And a team like Averett, even though they have what looks like an elite defense right now by the efficiency ratings, they're overall just modestly above average. They're a top 100 team by the efficiency ratings, but their offense is actually below average, but they're still a number 74 team by having such a strong defense. So these top quality defenses can make up highly ranked teams, mid-ranked teams. Probably you're not going to be a bad team if you have a top 5 defense in the country, but just interesting to see, maybe how different teams can reach their level of success. Similarly, top 5 offenses in the gray columns on the right, we have Wabash, UW La Crosse, Christopher Newport, Keene State, and Mount Union. Christopher Newport appearing in both columns. Obviously, if you're top 5 offense and top 5 defense, both, you have a chance of being a great team. And that's why the efficiency ratings currently have them as the number 1 team by the computer. They're, when you're top 5 in both, that means a big margin in between. Wabash is probably that flip side of that coin of Averett. They have the top overall offense, but their defense is below average. So they're a team that checks in at number 62 by the efficiency ratings. One of the reasons why maybe I didn't include them in my top 25 ballot was I'm just unsure what they're going to be overall. That defense so far doesn't look like it's going to be strong, even though they're scoring points in bunches. That doesn't, to me, make a total picture of a team that's quite in the top 25 for me. Jury's still out. And then next, teams like UW La Crosse and Christopher Newport, Keene State similarly are getting it done on both ends of the floor relatively at a relatively high level. Mount Union checking in there with a number 5 offense, very similar to Keene State, a 112 adjusted offense and a 91 defense. And just to remind people who maybe aren't as familiar with efficiency style ratings, the offensive and defensive ratings are points per 100 possessions. So looking at Wabash there, 116.4 points per 100 possessions is what they're expected to score against, let's say, an average team, or 1.164 points per possessions. And then defense, that's how many points you allow per 100 possessions. So on defense, lower is better, offense, higher is better. And then that margin, the difference between those two numbers, is how many points you would outscore an average opponent per 100 possessions. 100 possessions is more than an average game. An average game is typically about 74 possessions, but a system team might get to 100 in a game. So that's kind of a brief snapshot at the top of the efficiency ratings for both the offensive and defensive columns and what that kind of means for those teams. As you can see, you can be good on offense and bad on defense, and then you're kind of maybe more of a modestly good team. Or you can be very strong in both columns and make a play for one of the top 5 teams in the country.
So a couple of things that jump out at me is Christopher Newport's adjusted efficiency margin of 27.1. If I'm remembering correctly, I want to say that Randolph-Macon ended the year last year somewhere around 29. And I don't know if you remember that off the top of your head, but seeing that 27.1, they're kind of approaching what Randolph-Macon put up last year, which is surprising and impressive to see. I don't know. Do you recall that by any chance?
I would have to open the spreadsheet. I'm stealthily opening my my post last year. So Randolph-Macon was very high last year at plus 38. Number 2, Wisconsin Oshkosh at the end of the year was plus 29. But maybe also one thing to bear in mind a little bit is this time of year we still have a little bit of preseason projection baked in, and the way the projections are sort of made, it squishes teams towards the middle a little bit. So we probably won't see the full number, the full strength number completely play out for teams until we get closer to the end of December, or at least the middle of December. Maybe we'll probably start seeing most of this year's data.
Yeah, there was such a gulf between Randolph-Macon and number 2. I think that the difference between Randolph-Macon and number 2 was the same between number 2 and number 25. So it was going to be surprising if Christopher Newport was approaching what Randolph-Macon was last year. So I don't think you have to explain away why they're not quite there.
No, and I won't expect any team to get there this year. Most years, the top team is around plus 30, plus from anywhere from plus 29 to about plus 32. I think Randolph-Macon was the highest efficiency margin team last year at plus 38 that I had in my, 6 or 7 years of running the data.
Yeah, and people who've been watching D3 basketball for a long time would have that Randolph-Macon team in the conversation for one of the best D3 teams of all time. So that's a very high standard to be shooting for. But yeah, looking at the top offenses, La Crosse, Keene State, Mount Union, kind of in that, they've got top offenses, they've got defenses in that 91 range, which is, you look at the bottom of the top 5 on defense at Averett at 87.2. So they're not far off, even on the defensive side.
Yeah.
So you look at where these teams are ranking overall, and it's not surprising to see after you break it down into, well, they're one of the best offensive teams, they're among the best defensive teams. It's a pretty good recipe for coming out on top.
Yep.
So, I mean, early in the season, like you mentioned, there's some previous year's data still baked in, and there's a lot that can change because each game is such a large percentage of the overall total. But we thought this would be an interesting way to look at just how some teams are emerging in terms of top offenses and top defenses. So thanks for walking us through that.
Looking back at last week's picks, here's the recap. First game was Mount Union at Worcester. Mount Union won that game big, and they ended up covering that minus 4.5 points. Carroll was at Colorado College. Carroll was getting 4.5, but they won that game outright fairly convincingly, so they win the pick. Mary Washington at Johns Hopkins, we talked a bit about. Hopkins absolutely pasted Mary Washington. We both missed this one as Hopkins wins. Amherst was getting 4.5 at Yeshiva to Sunday, and Yeshiva won by 4. So Amherst actually covers that one. We both get it. And our D3 Datacast game of the week, Illinois Wesleyan was plus 6.5 at UW Oshkosh. UW Oshkosh won that one big, and I got that one. So looking at the weekly standings for this year, Zach, you were only 1-4 this last week, bringing you to 5-10. I was 3-2 for my second winning week in a row, and I'm at 9-6. I'm beating the computers so far. You have a little bit of work to do yourself.
Yeah, and it was just the half a point that Amherst was able to cover that kept me from a winless week. So
yeah, week 2, you did get unlucky with 3 overtime games that could have gone your way if for a bounce or two, and they all ended up going my way. So sorry about that.
It's early. This is all noise in the data. It'll all be worked out later, and as we get a larger sample size. Everyone knows that.
Lots
That's
of
how
time.
data works.
Yep, lots of time to play. You can catch up, but you will actually not catch up. All right. So here we are looking at this week's picks for the week of November 28th through December 4. The first game is St. Joseph plus 1.5 at Tufts. Who you got in this one, Zach?
Tufts has a good offense and a good defense, but as we discussed earlier, St. Joseph has the elite defense. I'll go with the elite trait. Give me St. Joseph.
All right, I'll give you St. Joseph. I am going to go against you on this one for the sake of dramatic tension, and I'm going to take Tufts. Plus 1.5 is pretty tight. That would suggest that maybe St. Joseph would be, like a 1.5 neutral court favorite or something like that, maybe. That's maybe a little tighter than I would be comfortable with, but I think that Tufts is putting together a good season. I have them in my poll I think I put them at 18. St. Joseph I had up at number 2, I believe. I've already forgotten. It's been 5 minutes since I submitted. So we'll see. It's going to be a good one. I will take Tufts. Game number 2 is LeTourneau +3 at Hardin-Simmons down in Texas. What do you think about this one?
I think LeTourneau has a little better offense, but a little worse defense, so the matchup looks pretty even. They have a common opponent so far in Schreiner, which was a road win for LeTourneau, and a home loss for Hardin-Simmons, so I will take LeTourneau.
Yeah, we must have done the same research on the team pages at d3hoops.com, a terrific website. And I saw similar things, and I was more comfortable going with LeTourneau here. In that game against, what was it, Schreiner, was particularly revelatory, I think, to me. Hardin-Simmons, I think, maybe had a few more home struggles in particular, and I was more comfortable with LeTourneau here. The next game, the third game, is the Battle of the Provisionals. Asbury, the 12.5-point favorite versus Warren Wilson. Break down all the numbers for us, Zach, here.
Yeah, so I brought this game to the slate. This is a chance to bring some new names into the D3 Datacast. We have two schools that are both second-year provisional, so we're not looking at NCAA tournament eligibility yet at this point. And this one's on a neutral court. So both have played really weak schedules. The difference is Asbury's actually won games. 12.5 is a big number, but I'll lay it.
Yeah, super excited to watch this game. Warren Wilson might be a system-like team. I think they're a very fast-paced team according to my numbers. I've never watched Warren Wilson. What are they like, a year 2 provisional, year 1 provisional?
Yes, both these schools are year 2 provisionals.
Year 2 provisionals.
Warren Wilson is already affiliated with the C2C. Asbury is currently an independent.
All right, great. I'm going to go with Asbury here because they're from Kentucky. Minus 12.5. Let's go cover it. I don't know where Warren Wilson's from.
What kind of research do you do?
They're provisionals. What am I supposed to do with those teams? Love you guys. Love you, Asbury. Love you, Warren Wilson. We'll see you in 2 years. All right, game number 4. Our Calvin Knights +7 at Wheaton Thunder. Zach, make your pick.
Matt, you know this goes against my nature in how I like to hedge bets and picks.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going Calvin +7, risking my fandom being disappointed as well as being wrong.
Yes.
I would rather be at least one or the other. If I'm gonna be disappointed, I would at least like to be right. But I'm gonna put that on a line because I think that 7 points is just a little too much. When Wheaton plays other good teams at home, they don't tend to win by margins that approach or get into double digits. So I think I'm a little bit worried with a young team going on the road. They played one road game at Illinois Tech, and once Illinois Tech put on the pressure in the second half, it didn't go great. But this will be a good learning opportunity one way or another. They will have basically a full week off. They will have a full week off. They don't play midweek. So I think there will be rest. There will be preparation. There will be the Calvin Chicago alumni contingent. Plus there's like 3 or 4 players from the Chicagoland area. So this is as good of an environment for a top road game as they could hope for. I think 7 is within reach. Give me the points.
Yeah, you and I both enjoy the emotional hedge if we ever were to have occasion to place a real money wager on a sporting event in a state in which that sort of thing is legal.
Well, this is why Michigan pasting Ohio State 2 years in a row in football has not been good for either of us financially.
Yeah, but it's been worth it.
Oh, yeah.
Take the win. I'm going to go with you, +7. This is a very tight matchup according to my ballot. These teams were very close to each other. I think the 7 is going to be too big. I think Calvin will make this a very good game. I don't know who's going to win. If I knew who was going to win, then I would be some sort of a genius. But that's why they play the games. But not a genius. Plus the 7 is very big for how close I think these teams are. Wheaton playing at home is a thing that scares me as a Calvin fan. But I will take these 7 points, and I will go with the Calvin Knights. They've shown me a lot this year. I've been very impressed with the young team. It's been a very, very exciting team to watch. I will also be taking the family to Wheaton for this game, and we will be sitting in King Arena on December 3 in CCIW territory. So since I will be there, that's another reason to be sure that Calvin will certainly cover the 7 points and most likely win the ball game.
They're undefeated in your presence so far.
This season, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been great. And do you want to talk about your background?
Yeah, I pointed. You mentioned King Arena. I pointed to the background. There it is. King Arena right there on the campus of Wheaton College.
Wheaton College, King Arena. Zach is in the house now. I will be in the house next week, Saturday.
Right. I think we were sitting right about here when Dan Altman tipped one in to secure a NCAA tournament win for Calvin.
That was great.
It was right about there.
It was a nearly buzzer-beating tip-in. Did it beat the buzzer? 2005 NCAA tournament, Division III.
Yeah, it beat the buzzer.
Well, I know it beat the buzzer, but was it like at the buzzer, or was it just like a second before? I don't quite remember.
In my euphoria, the finer details were lost.
Okay. Calvin beat Wheaton in 2005 NCAA tournament. I mean, they've beaten them since then too, but that's, a fond game for us. All right, D3 Datacast game of the week, RPI plus 4.5 points at Williams. Zach, go ahead and take your pick.
Yeah, the Williams non-conference schedule is really built to pick up wins, not to aid in their strength of schedule. However, this is one of the rare Massey top 100 non-conference games that Williams will play. So you can either say this is going to be a trip-up spot, or I'm going to lean a little bit to the other side and say this is a game that maybe they've got a little more emphasis, a little more focus on, because it is an important non-conference game for them. I will not be afraid to lay the 4.5 points, as I've been scared off by some big numbers, which has not been working out for me. I will lay the 4.5 and pick Williams.
Yeah, I'm going to go the same way. This is one of our less interesting slates, picking 4 of the same, picking on the same side of 4 games. I don't know what to make of Williams this year. I think that I have them too high, so I drop them down, and then I assess the teams, and then I think, man, I have Williams too low. So then I move them back up, and then I think I have Williams too high, and so I drop them back down. And I just don't know what to do with them. Like you said, I don't know that they've played the strongest schedule. I think they've been good. I think we expected them to be good. They have done nothing for me to knock them down. This will be a good test for them. It is at home, but plus 4.5 points, if Williams is a top 10 team, like maybe I think that they either are or on the fringes of are being, then this is a game that you should win and, probably cover that 4.5. All right, upset watch. This is the highest pressure section of our entire show at this point. So I dug and dug and dug. I suggested a few games to you that you did not like and thought were not good upset watch candidates. And then we came up with this one, and I think we both ended up liking this pick as an upset watch. So I think we agree here. Yeah? So we're taking Middlebury versus Carnegie Mellon on December 3. I believe this is a neutral site game. Middlebury is a team that was preseason number 14 in the D3Hoops.com poll. They haven't lost yet. I don't believe that they will be likely to move down, or at least move down once. Yeah.
They also really haven't been tested.
Have not been tested much. They're a team that I did not vote in the preseason, and I did not vote this year. I don't think that they're going to be bad. I just have not yet seen it from them. So here's maybe a chance against Carnegie Mellon, although Carnegie Mellon is not one of the strongest UAA teams, probably. Maybe the UAA is the best conference out there, so I don't know. They're all good. But in this game, currently, as of Sunday's Massey ratings, Massey likes Carnegie Mellon by 2. And by the efficiency ratings likes Middlebury by 3. So the computers think that this is probably a possession either way. So it should be a tight game. Maybe Middlebury will exceed our expectations and win this game, and then we'll all be happy to vote for them. Hope that happens for them. Maybe Carnegie Mellon shows that they're a strong team from a strong conference, and maybe Upset Watch hits again for the 4th week in a row, and maybe Carnegie Mellon gets the W. Either way, I don't think the computers will be surprised if this one is ultimately a close game at the final buzzer.
Yeah, you could say the pressure's on with the first 3 teams being put on upset watch losing, but the other way to say that is, hey, it's house money at this point.
Pressure's off. 3 of the women right.
You get 3 upset. You call 3 upsets all year. I think that's okay.
Mailbag. Our first mailbag question of the week comes from Anonymous. Here's the question. Is the system dead? Is it time to refer to the basketball played by Grinnell, Greenville, et al. Something else? If you watch Greenville or Grinnell play, they are no longer putting up big numbers, not subbing, not jacking up threes. It is basically Richardson 40 minutes of hell. Zach, I think you did a little bit of research on this one. What do you have to say about this?
Yeah, first we should say that neither of us are experts in the system. We haven't closely watched system teams over the years. I do know there's some variation as teams take the system and have molded it to their own liking. But still, I disagree with some of the assertions in the question. In terms of big numbers, if you look at some of the scores coming from Greenville games in particular, there are a lot of big numbers.
For the other team.
Yeah, well, I was going to say part of that. I know you've got some of the pace of play metrics, and also some of that is they are among, if not the actual worst defensive efficiency team in all Division III. So you're seeing some big numbers coming out of those games, specifically the Greenville games. In terms of not subbing, I looked through some box scores. I'm not sure where that is coming from. Both teams are playing 15 plus guys a game. The minutes distribution looks fairly even, certainly suggesting that they're still doing, line change style substitutions. In terms of not jacking up threes, I went and looked. Greenville is taking about 2/3 of their overall shots from 3. Grinnell is just over half their shots from 3. But one of the problems that both Greenville and Grinnell are having is they're just really not making any shots. I mean, they're both teams are shooting 32% from 3. So if you want to look at the 3-point shot from an analytics perspective, I mean, when you're shooting 32%, you've got an effective field goal percentage of only 48%, but Grinnell's making 51% on their 2-point shots. So with them taking just over half their shots from 3, maybe they're skewing a little bit more towards getting a drive for a layup over taking a 3, because it's, with the percentages, it's a better percentage play for them. Yeah, I did go back and I watched on demand some of Grinnell's game against Kenyon from earlier this past week, and you see a lot of hallmark things from the system. Like I said, the substitution patterns. There are times that they appear more content to play a little bit of a slower pace in the half court, but primarily they're still getting a shot up within 7 to 10 seconds into the shot clock. So there wasn't anything in what I watched and what I was seeing that suggests to me that the system is dead. I think what it comes down to is neither Greenville nor Grinnell are playing it very well. I mean, to kind of put it kindly, I think if either team was shooting better from 3-point distance specifically, I think it would look a lot different. But what I was seeing from Grinnell, they're still picking up full court pressure. They're still most of the time getting a shot up quickly. They're still taking at least half their shots from 3-point range. So I don't think it's dead. I think maybe it's like any offense is, it evolves and it morphs and it has to be tweaked to the personnel. And I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, I feel like in the history of the system, there's been some teams, maybe particularly Grinnell. I think a few Greenville teams maybe flirted more with like the average or slightly above average kind of line if you looked at an efficiency rating type model. Even though they give up a ton of points, they score a lot of points. They were running the system well. I don't really feel like any of the three teams that I know of that I think are running this style are Greenville, Grinnell, and Hunter. And they're all in my ratings model number 300 or lower in overall efficiency margin. Like you mentioned, Greenville is the lowest rated defense, and their offense is, barely above average, I think, if it even is. Yeah, it's barely above average. So you're playing with an averagey defense and a terrible offense. This system is designed to, either get steals or pressure the ball and then get a quick three or a quick layup. I don't know that that's happening right now. I think they're just giving up quick layups and then missing shots on the other end. So I think bad system ball, and I'm not a system expert by any stretch of the imagination. I might be wrong, but bad system ball probably leads you to be a really bad team, whereas good system ball, maybe in my mind, only lets you be maybe an averagey team. I know maybe you might play it because you have some recruiting challenges and that helps you get a certain type of player or be able to play without a certain type of player. But from right now, from what I see from these teams, is just not great execution at any level of basketball, or at least this is what the metrics tell me. I haven't really watched these teams this year that much. So I think maybe when you're a bad team, it just makes the system ball maybe even that much worse. And that's maybe an explanation.
Yeah, I like what you said. It comes down to execution. Doesn't matter so much what you do if you do it really well. And the fact of the matter is, Greenville and Grinnell, and you mentioned Hunter as well, they're not doing what they're trying to do particularly well, at least at the moment.
Yeah, and Greenville in particular is giving up records every night. Someone on the other team is setting a scoring record for their school, or the school is setting a scoring record, and it's just not pretty.
Right, because he's going 24 for 26 from the field.
Yeah,
like you mentioned, it's just
from right at the hoop.
Right, exactly.
All right, next question. Next question is a tweet, and it comes from Max Fan at Go Maccabees. There's a tweet series here. For the first time in several years, Yeshiva is no longer the top team in the Skyline according to the Massey ratings. Interestingly, Massey still has Yeshiva favored on the road against Farmingdale when they meet in February. D3 Datacast, any chance you can explain why that may be on the next show? And yes, we would love to explain that as far as we can. We're not, Massey experts, but we do enjoy the site. So next up is just a snapshot of how the ratings looked when this question kind of came in, I believe, on Saturday. So it might not be completely up to date, but this is the gist of the question. Here you can see on the screen, Farmingdale had a rating. They were ranked 130 on the Massey ratings. Yeshiva was 132, so they were pretty close. And then there's the snippet from the schedule page of Yeshiva at Farmingdale. It still shows they were expected to win 64% of the time with a predicted score of 77-72. And that looks kind of funny, right? Because Farmingdale's ranked higher and Farmingdale's home. So everything we know about basketball, a higher ranked team at home should probably win. And even if they're tight, it should be, 2-3 points, somewhere in that range. This is Yeshiva leading at home. And I think the answer is on how Massey calculates his ratings and the fact that on the site, there's actually sort of two styles of ratings. There's the ratings column, which is the default sorting mechanism that you can see there. It's actually highlighted in green, showing the sorting. And then there's the column to the right of that, which shows power. And Massey has a little section on his site called methodology, I believe. And that's where this next screen comes from. So just to explain here, Ken Massey says, the Massey ratings are designed to measure past performance, not necessarily predict future outcomes. The rating section is the overall team rating based on, the overall team rating is merit-based quantity and is a result of applying a Bayesian win-loss correction to the power rating. And the power rating is contrasting the overall rating. It's a better measure of potential, which is less concerned with actual wins and losses. So let me kind of maybe interpret what I think that means. The power rating is maybe what is started with in his system, and that looks at, I believe, the location of the game and the score of the game, and tries to calculate the team strength from that sense. So if you win a road game, or if you lose a road game by one, that might be a positive outcome because you kind of beat home court advantage in that sense. Or so looking at an entire team's schedule, who did they play? How strong was that team? Where did they play? Was the home and road? And what was the scoring differential? And he kind of calculates the power rating based on those factors. And then for his regular rating, applies a correction based on wins and losses to kind of give someone a bonus boost and make the ratings more, I don't want to say accurately reflect, but be a more true reflection of kind of those wins and loss aspects of it. So a game that we mentioned earlier in this show, for our Calvin Knights, they beat UW Oshkosh by 3 at home. So the power rating would maybe look at that result, and my understanding is would look at that and say these teams are really close, relatively even. The road team lost by 3. The rating section would apply a win-loss correction and bump Calvin ahead of UW Oshkosh for that game to show who won the game they executed or whatever, and so they're going to be kind of bumped up. So from kind of that methodology, the rating portion is a little bit better at describing what has happened to date. It's maybe a little bit more backwards looking focused, and the power section of the ratings might be more focused on looking at what might happen in the future based on the understanding of overall team strength. So I don't know if I did a great job of explaining that. Zach, do you have anything to add to what I said or anything you want to clarify there?
Yeah, well, just looking at kind of the dynamic in play between the rating and then the power rating. At this time of year, there's, the data is really in flux because not a lot of games have been played. So you look at a team like Yeshiva, who, when weighted with the previous year's data, looks a lot better than what they have actually achieved so far this year. So as the season, as results from this season get put in, they've taken a couple losses, so they've been knocked down of some spots in the ratings when the computer was looking at previous results that included having games with Ryan Terrell and Gabe Leifer, right? So we go back and we look and we see the rating is down, but the power is still up, and this is pretty consistent. Like we've talked about how Wesleyan has been one of the disappointing teams, right? So their rating on Massey is down to 151, but they came in to the season in preseason efficiency ratings. In the preseason, Massey looked pretty good, so their power is still at 44. So it seems like there's kind of a trend here with teams that have been knocked down from their preseason rating where the power number still is high. So I think that what's happening is the rating has been very quick to adjust to this season results, whereas the power may be lagging. And so yeah. Combine that with your explanation. I think that's as good as we can do, short of booking Ken Massey on our show.
That'd be fun. And also with Yeshiva specifically, they have 2 results early on in the season: road loss against St. Joseph by 9, road loss at Illinois Wesleyan by 5. The power section of that might look at those 2 road losses and say not that bad. The rating section might adjust and say yeah, but losses, and ding them a little bit more. So that might be also a reason why power is a little bit higher than rating. Also, this time of year, you just mentioned this, there's still some level of preseason expectation baked into his ratings, I assume, like they are as mine. So the ratings will adjust down faster if they had some losses than the power, which still might see some of that overall quality from the recent history of Yeshiva as well. So I think that clarification was good there, Zach.
Right. And then on the flip side, you look at teams that are high in the Massey ratings that have gotten there because they've had a really impressive season so far. A team like St. Joseph. So they're checking it at 5, but the power is at 20. I'm looking at Keene State, 11 in Massey ratings, but their power number is still 40. So look at those teams that are exceeding the preseason expectations, where we're looking at a weighting from previous years. Their Massey rating has gone way up, but the power number has been a little bit slower to respond. So kind of the opposite dynamic that we discussed there with Yeshiva. So it works both ways.
Yep. All right, that brings us to the next question. This one's a 2-part submission from friend of the show, Bob Quillman. Question 1, why does D3 Datacast not report scores with the winning team on top? Question 2, why is that such a suspect score reporting technique? He will hang up and listen. Thanks. Appreciate the question, Bob.
Yes, thanks to our good friend Bob for submitting our question to the mailbag. And as the primary social media manager for the D3 Datacast, I'll take the lead on this one. So here we've got a little screenshot to give an example of what Bob's talking about. This was from a tweet just as the game between Randolph-Macon and Mary Washington went final, and displayed there, you see Randolph-Macon 52, Mary Washington 58 final. So Bob is perplexed at why we would not list the winning score first. And in his attempt to drum up some sympathy or some support for his point of view, Bob tried to run out ahead of the mailbag with some tweets asking the community their perspective. But one of the responses he got was from the head coach at center, Greg Mason, and Greg gets it right here because he notes there's a difference in the intent of the presentation. Now, Greg says, when announcing a game, the losing score being first is always like fingernails on a chalkboard. But when announcing like this on a website, etc., I always read that the second team is the home team. And Greg, thank you. You're absolutely correct. So the question you have to ask with these tweets is what's the purpose being served here? And so thanks to the Google machine, we have a little blurb here that says, which team is the home team on a scoreboard? In the United States, the home team is usually written second. So thank you, Google. That's very important. So our tweets are meant to be scoreboard updates. Therefore, we're going to follow the scoreboard convention with the home team being listed second, which would either be on the bottom or to the right, however the case may be. And the reason that we prefer this, I'm going to say we, but I'm really speaking for me as the person who primarily creates these tweets. Matt, you'll have your chance to agree with me later. But the reason we like to do this is because it gives the added context of which team is at home. In Division III, our teams are representing some of the finest academic institutions in the nation. And I trust that people can tell which team is leading by looking at the numbers, not needing to worry about what position they are in the tweet. So some other examples here, I pulled a screenshot from a score, some NFL scores as presented inside the Twitter app. You see a box score line from Presto Sports. We also see another tweet presenting a final score. Now, I will say, going back to Greg's tweet here, when announcing a game or if you're talking about a game, if you're writing an article about a game, yes, the winning score should be listed first. You would always put the winning or leading score first to say, Calvin beat UW Oshkosh 59-56. Or Illinois Wesleyan lost to UW Oshkosh 66-47. You wouldn't switch those around. Yes, that's correct. However, what we're talking about here is presenting an update in the form of a scoreboard. And thus, the home team will be listed second. So just to summarize, go back. So why do we do it? Because that's literally how scoreboards work. I don't know if we need to schedule Ballroom A in Fort Wayne to put on a seminar how scoreboards work, but we can look at that. And so the second question then, why is that such a suspect score reporting technique? Well, the simple answer is it's not.
Wow, that was thorough. All right,
I'm glad that we can handle Twitter syntax controversy instead of flop call controversy.
Hey, no one loves pedantry more than I do. Let me just start with that. Um, I do not care how anyone writes the score on Twitter. You can do whatever you want, people. To me, Twitter is something in between a conversation. It's just a person shouting to the void, "Hey, Calvin beat UW Stevens Point today by 11, everybody." And it's in between that and a scoreboard update. Right, this is the score. I think if you want to do it, the leading team first, I think that's fine. If you want to do the home team always on the bottom, I think that's fine. Just don't put the road team losing on the bottom. I think that would be wrong. That's the only thing I'm going to say is wrong. I think the other two ways are just fine. I totally agree with you. If you see a score, Randolph-Macon 52, Mary Washington 58, very few people are going to be confused as to who won the game. But I would also read that to understand, oh, Mary Washington won and Mary Washington was home. If that same tweet was Mary Washington 58, Randolph-Macon 52, I would say, cool, Mary Washington won the game. But because the leading team was listed first, I probably wouldn't automatically assume that they were the road team. I probably would just say it was listed that way. I don't care. Do whatever you want. But yes, that is a score convention that's fine when doing a scoreboard. Probably stems from baseball, top of the inning, bottom of the inning. I don't know. Soccer usually does it the other way. Home team's listed first, not second, at least in Europe.
I think it's a European thing.
Maybe a European thing. They're weird.
Right. Because they do things backwards.
So I don't care. I'm usually very, very pedantic about a lot of things, but I do not care about this one. Do whatever you want. Zach, you're in charge of the social media account, generally speaking, so post away. That's fine with me.
Yep. I will continue to do it the correct way. Thank you, Matt.
Yep. Appreciate the call, Bob. Write us again soon. That brings us to the end of the mailbag. Anything else you have to say wrapping up the week, Zach?
I'm looking forward to seeing that next top 25 to see how much it changes. I'm a little bit worried with the way it came out. I'm a little bit worried that some of the people who maybe were a little bit too reliant on the final poll last year for their preseason poll may not have picked up on some of the important results that happened Sunday night, as maybe they already submitted a poll. I'm not sure, but anyway, it'll be interesting to see. Looking forward to that.
I think balloting wasn't open until the Hopkins game was final.
Okay, well, maybe they didn't submit, but they could have.
They could have made theirs, yes.
Had their little notebook, and yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, that Mary Washington, Johns Hopkins result was probably one that made some people either rethink or adjust how they thought they were going to submit their top 25. So we'll see. But yeah, just I'm looking to see who are the big movers, who are the big risers, to see. I think there were a few teams that you decided from the preseason poll were immediate cross-off teams and not even ones that you had to consider. So interesting to see if any of them are still getting any points. So yeah.
On my preseason watch list that I had compiled, I think 25 of them between preseason and now are what I would call a cross-off, where I'm going to follow their results as much as I follow any D3 results, but they're not ones that I will purposely go back through at the end of the night or at the end of the week to say, what did this team do? If they don't pop up on the ratings or, playing another top 25 team or something, like, they're probably not going to be considered for a few weeks now until they put together some higher results.
Yep, you can stay connected with us throughout the week on social media. Search D3 Datacast on Twitter and Facebook. And if you want to submit a question for next week's mailbag, you can leave a comment on this episode on YouTube or send us a tweet or a message on Facebook. Have a good week.
Good job, team.